Okay, so I'll just yield all my time to you. Because, you know, after that, I don't know what else should be said. You should just get right into the questions and the answers. That was on the money. So I am the mayor of the city, the state's largest city. It is the city of my birth, where I was born and raised. In 1967, my father was handcuffed to a wheelchair in the hospital in the middle of the rebellion in Newark because he was hit over the head by a classmate of his who had become a police officer in the Newark Police Department from Barringer High School. He pulled him over in the car. He got out of the car in the middle of the rebellion. He recognized him. He went to speak to him, and in the process of him speaking to him, he hit him over the head. They took him to the hospital. My mother did not know where he was for almost an entire day. It was actually some poets who were not in the country, Ralph Ginsberg, as a matter of fact, who called over to Newark to find out what happened to the poet Leroy Jones and Ras Baraka. Where is he? We understand that he's arrested, but he was in a hospital chained to a wheelchair in 1967 in the middle of that. It is only by the will of the people and by the grace of God that his son is now the mayor of that same city. I believe that everything that we do and are doing is a reflection of the things that have happened before us. And sometimes we don't understand that, and we should. I think that a lot of us believe that we got what we are simply because we have great resumes. And I understand that your resume is important and you should improve your resume. But there was a time when people wouldn't even read your resume. So you have to give credit to the people who made it possible for you to be here, not simply because of your resume, but simply because they allowed people the opportunity to read that resume of yours. I always say to myself that you're not the smartest dude in the world. You know, there were some people that were a lot smarter than you who didn't have access to the things you have access to because the world was different during the time that they lived, and they worked harder so I could have access to the things that I have access to now. So I agree with Mayor Mapp that we stand on the shoulders of giants, which means that what we do is that much more significant. I think it's very important now. In New Jersey, there are about over 500 municipalities in the state of New Jersey. There are less than 30 African-American mayors in these municipalities. It's important for us to make a serious mark, not just on what's happening in our city, but make a mark on what's happening in the state, in the country, to be able to express what it is that we need to express, not only about the deficiencies that are taking place in our communities, but about the deficiencies that take place in this country. There were actually more African Americans in office during the Reconstruction than there are today. So right after slavery, during Reconstruction, there were more African American elected officials, I mean senators, governors of that time, I mean during that period. And that was probably one of the most progressive periods in the South during the time when African Americans were in those elected positions. This is when we got public school. This is where a lot of those things began to originate, the fight for democracy. And so those elected folks didn't just fight like people thought they would for ex-slaves. They fought for workers and Americans, period. Public school was just not open for black people. It was public school for everybody, even the sons of former folks or folks that down there that were, you know, planters or the sons and daughters of planters. But the reality is that ended because of a compromise that was made in 1877, known as the Hayes-Tilden Compromise, where the troops were taken out of the South. And when the troops were taken out of the South to protect the rights of former slaves, then we had what was called the slave codes, or the Solid South, and it reverted back to what it was, you know, right before Reconstruction took place. And we have what's known as the slave codes, which then turned into Jim Crow, which we've been fighting for hundreds and hundreds of years since then. And so it's important when you are an African-American elected official, in my eye, not to just fight for the concerns of African Americans, but to fight for democracy for all people. That is our history. That is the history of our struggle in this country, that America is more democratic because we fought for it to be democratic. We were always the chink in its armor. It was always the piece that reminded America in the middle of 1776, and when they were celebrating the 4th of July, Frederick Douglass, who was born as a slave, whose parents was a slave, got up and said, what does the 4th of July mean to a slave? And most people took that as anti-American, as they would today, but what he was telling them was, if America is proclaiming justice and freedom and brotherhood to the world, then what are they doing to their African brothers that are here in this country? And that kind of exposing of contradiction forced America to embrace democracy at a higher level. And those kind of struggles benefits all Americans of good conscience and of goodwill. And these are the kind of things that we have to continue to push for in our offices. And so when we fight the kind of issues that Mayor Taylor brought up, which are very cognizant and very heavy in our communities every single day, high unemployment rates, twice that of the state, twice that of the country for the last 50 years. You know, African-American male unemployment rate almost 40–50%. When you're talking about almost half the children growing up in poverty, less than 13% have a secondary degree out of high school in this city. When you're talking about the levels of incarceration of 2 million people in jail, 50% of those people being people of color, those are issues that we have to deal with, not just because we're black, but because we're American. And it's important for us to understand that and push it to make it better and better and better. And that means that the policies that Mayor Mapp talked about are very important. And how do we become our brother's keeper, our sister's keeper? What do we do in this country to make sure that we are making equality real for hundreds of millions of Americans? It reminds me, and I'll stop, when slavery ended, to allow somebody to say, now you're free to do what? Now you're free to walk off the plantation, when at the same time in the West they were allowing people in homesteading to race and find land and give them property and land and grow. But we didn't get that, so we was given freedom without freedom. We was given a promise of 40 acres and not a mule, but it was 40 acres and some money, but that was it. But we never received any of that. That was actually an order a general order from the Army, from General Sherman, but that never transpired into anything, because the President Johnson, after Lincoln died, rescinded that. He rescinded that, so that never took place. So what you did was put millions of Africans, you put them into America with no structure, no land, no money, no jobs, no skills, no education, and you put them out there and say, fend for yourself, you're free, and then began to penalize them when they could not make something out of nothing, which is still kind of what's happening today, where people who came as colonists to America were given the opportunity to take land on their own. So here's your land for free. You can build on this land if you have the wherewithal to build, and you raced and you made this happen. It's a great kind of historical discussion around the westward expansion and the homesteading and all of these things that allow people to become full Americans. And we're still, in 2015, trying to fight for full citizenship in this country. We're the only people in the world that was made into property. So we were not like human beings. We were property. We were like a tree or a cattle or a horse. You know, you were property. So in fact, the Constitution delineated you as 3/5 of a human being, right? And Dred Scott said you had no rights that they were bound to respect, because property can't sue. Right? So your house can't sue you, so you have no rights that the master has to respect, because you're not human. And so we're still fighting for our humanity, which is why people are walking around with shirts that say Black Lives Matter. Right? So, I mean, that's important for us, and as mayors of these cities, we have a great responsibility to be role models for other kids and other young people, to allow them to see the opportunities that they can do if they study hard, if they work hard, if they organize, if they grow. that you can have these things, but you also have to deal with the contradictions that exist in this country and fight those contradictions at the same time, and try to wrestle with the resources that we have to improve the conditions of the many Americans that live in my city called Newark, the 300,000 residents that live in the city, to try to wrestle with the riches, because Newark is a rich city. It's an extremely rich city. The problem is the wealth of Newark is taken out of the city, and the people in Newark don't have that wealth. So yeah, we need strategies that help us keep the wealth in our city. And some of it is procurement, what the mayor was talking about, and other kinds of issues. And we'll get into that, I guess, when we ask questions. So thank you.